Okay, everybody, we're starting in 13, 12, 3, 2, 1. Good morning. All right. Greetings. I'm Steve Patrick. It's my pleasure to welcome you. Join Melody and who welcomed you last night to this great gathering, which she mentioned was the 12th time we've come together, which is unbelievable to me. And like Melody, it's a thrill to welcome you all here. I will not be dancing like Melody did last night, so I just want to lower expectations right now. I also want to just acknowledge where we are. Thank the legacy of the Ute people who surely knew what we all know, which is that magic happens in Aspen. But we're privileged and honored to be on the sacred land to the Utes. I also want to acknowledge yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day. And we thank our representatives of the First Nations who are in the room for being the model for talk about survival, talk about resilience. So it's a pleasure to be with all of you on this day. I want to resurrect and bring back the metaphor of the aspens. See, why do I get a chuckle from the entire team in the front row when I say that? So many years ago, when we all first came together as a network, it was a time when we had just gotten a grant from the Ford Foundation. And where's Doug Wood? He's somewhere in here. And the two program officers who replaced Doug couldn't be here, but it takes two to replace Doug at Ford. And the question was, will you be a durable network? What is a durable network? And I think we didn't know the answer. We were honest. We didn't know what this was going to lead to. And so when I look out on this crowd, I have a real sense of what they meant by a durable network, and one that continues to grow, continues to focus on impact, continues to help create more opportunity for more young people everywhere across the country. But I think Aspen's, and when we first came together, I shared that I was hopeful. My greatest hope was like a stand of aspens, right? And we'll refresh for those of you who weren't here all those years ago. Aspens grow in stands. They grow with connected roots. They can't grow by themselves. They need to share a common root. And when we first met, I said, I hope we'll come together over the years and that we'll develop that same sense of a common root, of common knowledge, of shared connectivity. And I just want to get 5 fingers if you feel like you've got that for folks who have been to this before. 4 if may a lot, and 1 if not so much. But let me just see if there's some common roots in the room. Thank you, especially the suck-ups in the front who put the 5 up. Right, double 10 for Mel. That's a beautiful thing to have that sense of being a stand, an Aspen stand. If you look out that window right there, up on Red Mountain, you'll see actually a stand of aspens on the top of Red Mountain that hold that whole ecology together. You take those aspen roots, you take that aspen stand off that mountain, a whole lot of billionaires are going to lose their homes real fast. So I want to build on the metaphor of the aspens in this moment we're in right now, because there's another piece about aspen stands that's just, I think, magical. And that is, in the West, well, where aspens grow, when a fire hits, it's devastating, right? It wipes everything out, but not everything. Because the first trees that come back after a major fire are aspens. They sprout right away. They shoot up. And they grow in a way that creates an inclusive, better system, better ecology, right? They shoot up straight and long, and they make space for everything underneath them to get that nourishment, to get what it needs, sunlight, rain. And that's the kind of restorative growth that we want to see in our networks and our communities. That's the kind of leadership that we see in all of you as you're back home or in your national networks or however you represent. That's the kind of ecology that we all want to focus on in our place. We want to grow that way. We want to make the ecology stronger. We want to turn the tragedy of a fire, and this is a very important moment in this community around the tragedy of a fire, because we had one here last summer, and the valley was filled with smoke, and it was, people were evacuated. Some of them were housed at the Institute. Some of the folks who are bringing you the amazing meals and taking care of things, making us all comfortable, were displaced. Yeah. Some of our staff had to move in to the Institute, and the Institute responded. In a little while, you get a chance to hear from our new leader, Dan Porterfield, and it was trial by fire for him. And actually, the whole community rallied around the restoration, the protection of our community. But now the threat is mudslides and those kinds of things. And it's a real threat. So what happens? The first thing that happens is the aspens, the first sign of hope. So you could almost say, here's where I get to stretch the metaphor, but stay with me, people. You could almost say that what aspens do is really healing-centered, right? Healing-centered. So when we hear from Dr. Sean Ginwright tomorrow, about healing-centered practice, moving from trauma-informed to healing-centered, we'll ask them if that's what the aspens represent. Because to me, it's logical. And when they come up, and I lived for a long time in northern New Mexico, we had a lot of fires, you can almost hear the aspens saying, "We gonna be all right," right? So we know about these fires. And there are some fires in this country right now. Some of them have been smoldering since the beginning of our nation, right? Some of them start with the original sins of the near genocide of Native peoples and of slavery. Those are smoldering fires, and sometimes they ignite, right? And they've been ignited recently. And it's been rough. It's been rough. Don't tell me that it ain't a scorched earth fire going on down on the border right now when young people and their families are being moved into focused, concentrated camps, if you want to call it that. Don't tell me it's not a fire when we see so much racial tension right now in the communities around us. So for that moment we're in, we have to hold ourselves to a level of regeneration, of recuperation, of healing that happens in the natural ecology, but it's going to take a whole lot of effort from all you aspens in this room. Now, some of you are wondering, what does an aspen stand look like up close? My first answer is get out and hike a little, people. But I do have a photo of an aspen stand, and why don't we throw that up when you guys have a chance up in the back. And you can see really the beauty of that stand. Now that to me looks like a durable network. That's what that looks like. For those of you who missed it last night, that was the dancing at the party. Man, wasn't that performance incredible, by the way? So let me just do one thing. Let me ask, and I'm about to wrap up my opening remarks, so don't worry, people who suffer from Steve fatigue. But let me just wrap it up with back to the challenge of the fires in front of us and the call and responsibility that we all carry in our work and in our communities and with the young people by just asking us to stand like an aspen stand. And the first thing I'd like to do is just acknowledge who the heck has been crazy enough to come to 12 of these gatherings and to be that active. So if you've been to 12 of these, and if you can't stand, raise your hand, but I'd love to see you stand. Stand up if you've been to all 12 of these. All right. All right. So stay up. Nobody gets to sit yet. Stay up. How about if you've been to like 10 or more? 10 or more. All right. So the rest of y'all now you know who to get the restaurant recommendations from in Aspen and whatnot, right? All right, keep standing. How about if you've never been to one of these crazy-ass gatherings in your life before? If you're new to this gathering, please stand. All right. Woo! Yeah. Thank God y'all are here. It's been getting old, so We need your new energy. Stay up. Don't sit back down. Don't sit back down. Stand up if you're one of the young people representing right now. If you self-identify as young, stand up. All right, stand up if you've been here before and for some crazy reason you decided to come back. Let me just see. All right, this is also what a durable network and an Aspen stand looks like. So the last fire that I just want to, when we started this work, don't sit unless you have to, then you can. You may if you're, and if you can't stand, just keep waving. But the last fire I just want to speak to from my heart, so if I choke up, stay with me, is sort of what we're seeing around the dominant white male culture in our country right now, right? The long smoldering fire of sexism works alongside those other original sins I mentioned. And I just want to acknowledge, when we first got together as a network, we said we're not going to go around the hard issues. We're not going to use euphemistic language or like socioeconomic, or we're going to talk about race, right? We're going to go through it. We're not going to go around it. Well, we need to collectively go through this sexism thing, right? When we need to acknowledge what's going on in our country right now. So I just want to do a little something, and I want to ask all of you to join me in this. And it's a little risky, but let's try it. So first, in 1 minute, nobody move. I want to just ask folks to think about where we are in terms of gender equity, gender justice in our country, right? Second, I think we need to model making room for the women to lead, right? So what I'd like us to do in a minute is I'd like to ask the men, if you're willing, to sit back down, or maybe even take a knee. Recognize the intersectionality of these issues, right? And then if the men are willing, if you sit, I'd like us to have a moment of silence just to acknowledge the women and the power of women and feminine leadership and the need for it right now in our country, all right? And we'll let the women, and Lord knows I ain't the right messenger for this, so appreciate your indulgence. But we'll let the women connect, and we'll just take a moment of silence, and you all look at each other, you do what you need to do. You hug if you need to hug, you fist bump, that's more of a masculine thing, but whatever you need to do, you guys connect. And I'd like to ask you to try to step into your power in that moment. When we, the men, step back, step down, all right? And we'll just take a moment, we'll acknowledge where we are in this country, and then we'll get back to your originally scheduled program. All right, so if the men are willing, take a knee, take a seat, please. And let's all close our eyes and go inward as men. How are we going to make room for this leadership? What are we going to do differently in our daily practice to elevate the sisters in our work? And to y'all who are still standing, please take a moment to connect. All right, I'm bringing us back. Thank you for that, you guys. Thank you. Yeah. All right, together now, back at your table, please just acknowledge each other. We don't need to stay divided, but together, collectively, we're going to have a major impact on the work going forward. Without further ado, I want to bring up Jamiel Alexander to get the program started, and I really appreciate you all. Oh, so, no. Yeah, right. Actually, let's take an artistic moment, and then we'll bring Jamiel up.
Do your thing. Do your thing. Go with it.
Yeah, thank you. She wanted me to paint the curves of her face, claim the expanse of a cheek, take her to where beauty was commonly rumored to be. She waited beneath my parted lips, anticipating pixie dust exhalations, claiming I had moxie after asking what the microphone on my necklace was for. I saw her self-esteem. It was burning a hole in her pocket, and I made a silent oath not to lie at her expense. I listened intently as she presented hopeful requests of, okay, I want a simmering sunset across my forehead, hairline inflamed, framing moonstone pool eyes, dimension multi, light reflecting, make me so pretty that I can't see. Then they won't want to hurt me, right? Just make me precious, please. Two fingertips beneath her chin tilted back to catch the right amount of powdery fluorescence, I laced my questions with subtlety. You know, sales, inquiries that create need, like, sis, what kind of changes have you noted lately? What does your daily regiment consist of? Drawing audible lines for her to read between. Have you ever guided a reluctant queen to her throne? She was begging for me to paint her in peach kisses to highlight this life lived lost, searching all the wrong mirrors, unaware of how to invest self in fruitful ventures like I've got love in a jar, going at a bargain. Only costs half a lifetime for your first installment. No need to sign for your second shipment. We'll keep you as long as you'll stay. And I wish that we could just wash our faces and hands and feet together and name each other beautiful. But right now, she wouldn't even believe me unless I waved my myriad of magic wands and repeated fabricated incantations about perfection for a price so high, it must be worth it, right? Staring at receipts with these cliched notions of the amount of people she could have fed. Book spots and read in my mind, screaming, don't you know that death can look like this? Like silent eyes and vacant lips, 'cause no amount of rainbow could ever color your convincing. You're dumping shovelfuls of sand into the sea like you're just trying to build an island, like isolate, become, awash in the monsoon of misconception, forgetting the most effective way to say that, baby, God don't make mistakes. And even if she did, they wouldn't look like you. I promise. I swear. I'll give you a money-back guarantee that you cannot carry validity in your pocket, baby. I know it is so dark in here. But when we do our job properly, we will never be at a loss for light. Thank you.
One time for Bianca. One more time, please. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Before I get started, I do have a bio. To whom much is given, much is required, but I appreciate Sister Mo. She said, Jamiel, be you. and this is why I love working and serving. So I need you all this morning. Put your forks down, glasses down. I need your hands. Welcome to the village. It's a call and response. If you know it, you know it. If not, we're about to put you on. So we're going to say clap. 1, 2. Clap. 1 heartbeat. 1 heartbeat. Hold it. Feel the love. Feel the energy. I can't touch everybody, but this is how we connect. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for letting me be me. I had to get that out. So welcome. So to whom much is given, much is required. One, I want to thank you, and even Brother Steve just kind of opened it in that because as a mama's boy, I was raised by a strong woman, and in this era of Me Too, I want to salute you all. My mother's not here, but I believe her energy is still with me to this day, so thank you for that. My queen is here. She's not going to let me call her out, but I appreciate her being here today. So, as an introduction to our new president, I just wanted to make sure I highlight a couple of things. You all can read his bio. When it was all said and done, I want to make sure we emphasize on the fact that his commitment to equity across many different roles throughout his career, and I respect that, right? Working with immigrants, the work in prisons, senior vice president at GW, Georgetown University, the president of Franklin and Marshall, where he held the Next Generation Initiative, which resulted in the institution of tripling income Pell students and doubling the enrollment of students of color. This led to a national call to other colleagues and presidents via the American Talent Initiative. But on a humble, right? Everybody know originally from Philadelphia. It is what it is. I live in York County now. I've been there since the juvenile justice system in 2002, where I was blessed to serve at Christmas Addicts. And in 2004, I want to make sure I respect you in a way where, as the president then, you opened up so we can have the Martin Luther King Day of Service. So to have this honor to introduce you, welcome. Welcome. And so before we go on, there is a video we would like to share. And this is why I really feel like he's the perfect fit as far as this leadership going forward in the culture. Could we play that video, please?
That experience taught me from my mom that we all have to decide what kind of person we're going to be. You have to make that choice. Try to make that choice the right way every step forward from that experience.
Pull that up a little bit more. What kind of?
Well, you know, I really think that for those of us that have the privilege of being born in America, white, we have to make an active choice. What kind of a white person am I going to be? And you make that choice in 1972, you make it differently in 1982, make it differently in 1992, but we still have to make that choice as a society. Those of us born with privilege, we have to be able to try to adopt a perspective where we see the world through others' eyes and empty ourselves of some of the assumptions that make us think that the advantages we have are shared by all.
This story does.
One, two. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Porterfield. Much respect. Much respect.
Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold and a little bit of late night travel. It might be a help, Morgan, if it's possible, just for me to have a little bit of water up here. Yes. Oh, thank you. So thank you, Jamiel, for that wonderful introduction and for your own reflections on your leadership journey. And Bianca, thank you for that extraordinary poem and performance. Lots of gratitude for me. First, the fearless leadership of Steve Patrick and Monique Miles and their teams for this powerful convening. Please join me in thanking them for all they did. It's an honor to share the stage with Melody Barnes, whose commitment to justice and equity runs deep as a river. Thank you for being here, Melody. I'm grateful to all of you, all of our partners, for convening here. 12 years running in so many cases. That is amazing. And my hope is that in addition to having riveting conversations and renewing the sense of calling that leads you to this work, you're enjoying the opportunity here to think together and then step out into these majestic wilds and take in some of that grandeur that's around us. Bianca's closing line was really amazing. I'm not sure I quoted it perfectly, but it's so dark in here, but when we do our job properly, we will never be at a loss for light. Yeah, gorgeous, gorgeous, thank you. A great theme for our work. And it sets up very well, and thank you so much, Bianca. Two stories I'd like to tell and a couple reflections, and then we'll have time for a conversation. The first story is from about 6 years ago. I was at Franklin and Marshall College as president, was hosting 62 16-year-olds from low-income backgrounds all around the country on my campus for a 3-week college prep course in which they would really get a chance to work with top professors, hang out with each other, get the feeling of what it's like to own a college campus, go back to their high schools for senior year, motivated to really make the final push in order to get an opportunity to go to a great college. These kids came from South Texas and Central Pennsylvania, from South Central LA and Chicago, all across the US. All were low income, but they had many other different interests and identities. It was exciting to see white and black, Latino and Asian, Native American, Christian and Muslim, urban and rural, LGBT and straight, cisgender, all together in class as roommates on campus, 62 16-year-olds taking hold of the campus. And we did this every year for 8 years, but this was the second year. These kids fell in love with opportunity, and they fell in love with each other. And then about 2 weeks into our 3-week program, they had really bonded. We hosted an outside speaker who wanted to draw out from the students deep and difficult ideas, but it didn't go that well. She did an exercise asking students to stand if they were poor and then sit down, to stand if they'd ever been hurt and then sit down, to stand if they'd ever been beaten or abused and then sit down. And this went on a little bit longer. Then she stopped and she asked the 62 kids how they felt. And there was a moment of silence, just total silence. You could hear the hearts beating. And then one girl started to cry. And then one boy erupted in tears. And then 2 more did. And then soon half the room had exploded into tears, moaning, weeping. In some cases, they were absolutely inconsolable. I was witness to this. I watched as other students tried to go around the room, to hold one another, to rub their backs, to bring a glass of water, to say it would be okay, to whisper in their ear. In terms of their identities, it did not matter who was what. Everyone was reeling. When you saw across that room the fractured base of security that so many young people have to cope with, and in this case, although her intentions were good, the means by which the facilitator tried to bring the students together had the effect of opening wounds we really weren't ready in that setting to treat or to help to heal. And so I was a witness to that. And as a witness, and we're all witnesses, it's my responsibility to try to prevent the circumstances that give rise to such agony and to make available real resources to help repair trauma and tragedy so that young people can move forward. And I've seen that happen, young people moving forward. Education can help them move forward. So can counseling. So can all the other riches that life has to offer. Family, a good job, a safe community, an intimate love, the chance to play a sport or build or sing or vote. The vast majority of those 62 teenagers went on to college. I handed 10 of them, about 5 years later, their well-earned degrees from Franklin and Marshall College, including Nadia Johnson, who's now teaching in Baltimore, Michelle Bailey, who's now advising rural students in central Pennsylvania about college opportunity, Andrea Martinez, now organizing a program that provides college opportunity to low-income students. Brandon Smith, Mwata Nkosi, Coleman Klein, and Anthony Thomas, all holding their first full-time jobs as young people out of college and doing great. Thank you. What's in my eyesight when I remember this, that darkness and that light, caring kids of every race and region, holding each other's hands and seeking together a place of peace, and then standing up and going to school to create that place of peace, not just for themselves, but for others. I see their vision, their leadership, and most of all, I see the future of America, right there in the minds and lives and strides of our young people. The future of America is a tribal leader working to expand employment opportunities in Eagle Butte, South Dakota. The future of America is a community college student in Austin, Texas, preparing for a major in cybersecurity while raising her daughter. The future of America is a high school student in a KIPP public charter school interning in Mayor Cantrell's office in New Orleans. Many people, many towns, many cultures, many stories. Like the great novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie says, it's dangerous to think in terms of single stories when in fact our world is made of many. By the future of America, I also mean something that's about structures and systems. I'm thinking of the leaders, the future leaders of our country, the bridge builders, the workers and makers and wall breakers and community creators. Some people say we have other more pressing crises to deal with right now in America, like climate change or political polarization, or the way technology is disrupting how we work. And those problems are real. They say investments in the young is a nice to have, but not a must have. But the simple fact on the matter is that every one of those problems requires young people educated, equipped, and empowered to act. Climate change? Who else but the young are going to stop an impending global tragedy born of fatalism and denial? The renewal of democracy? Who else but the young are going to teach their legislators how to respect one another and get things done that matter? Economic revitalization? Please. We're facing the greatest mass migration in American history. It's the migration of the baby boomers born in the 40s and 50s and early 60s into retirement. Guess who's going to replace them in the workforce and pay for their Medicare and their Social Security? Young people. But only if we can tape up our torn social contract and invest massively in those same young people, in their education, their professional development, their civic empowerment, like we ought to. That's the right thing to do, and for our country, it's the smart thing to do. Right now, the U.S. is projected to have more jobs that require a college degree in 5 years than we have young people with the education able to fill them. That is a recipe for a national disaster. We have to call people to account to invest in the young. This is what the Aspen Institute is trying to do across our some 60 different programs, leadership programs, international programs, public policy programs, to mend the social contract. We strive to be a transformational force for good in communities near and far, convening thinkers and leaders, bringing into contact the very best research and ideas, framing and helping to solve the great difficulties of the day, confronting challenges others turn away from, investing in change makers of every type and networks like yours, like this one, always ensuring the questions of ethics and values and meaning have a prominent role in our conversations and our society. We're doing this globally and locally in partnership with young people, from all, and not just young people, but the adults that are trying to help those young people have safe passage through the rocky waters of late adolescence into secure, independent adulthood. That's what a great society does. The Aspen Forum on Community Solutions and today's Opportunity Youth Forum are critical to the Aspen Institute's mission, and your work will be a bigger part of our mission in the years and decades to come. You can count on that. Thank you. Your work is so impressive to me precisely because it's built around the cultivation of the spirits and the talents of the young, an asset-based approach. You know, as leaders and as institutions, I believe we must, to borrow a phrase from 20th century Catholic social teaching, we must commit to what's called a preferential option for young people, and by which I mean we should think of young people first and not last. We should invest more and not less in their talent. We should push a youth agenda in research and public policy and sort of public system reform, and we should muster all the political courage that it takes to fix those problems today that will disrupt the lives of today's young people tomorrow unless we adults get our act together. And some say we can't afford to spend more national treasure on the young. I say we can't afford not to. Think of it this way. I'll pick up where Steve left off. Let's imagine we're all ranchers right here in Aspen, Colorado. And what would you do if a little stand of aspen trees, a little bunch of saplings, shot up on the hillside behind your house? Would we ignore it and let it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Will we chop it down and burn it so we can enjoy the power of having fire? Would we uproot it, saying, hey, we don't like new trees like you. Go back where you came from? Or, fearing its spreading roots, would we lock it up in a dry, airless chamber full of other trees, let them all sit there rotting away because their growth scares us too much? I don't think so. I think we invest in that beautiful life and give it the soil and sun and water and shade it needs and put seeds around it and give that stand a whole mountainside of friends, a community. And then we have a hillside of aspen trees, doing what these trees are supposed to do, forming that vast interdependent root structure that Steve talked about beneath the earth, an integrated communal force, a collective power that keeps each individual tree upright and well-nourished and fortified, so that together they can help us all by doing things like stopping soil erosion and turning light into oxygen and giving birds a place to rest and inspiring those who take the time to look with their inner glowing godlike beauty, which we always see in the young. That's how we see the young, a vast, integrated, communal force in which we must invest. A great society doesn't ignore the hungry hearts of the young, but instead organizes itself at all levels and all communities to draw out the voices of the next generations coming up. We should create with the young, not for them, a society in which the young feel seen and heard and supported and empowered and welcomed and launched and respected. The amazing thing, too, is that when we neglect the young, even then, they go forward anyway and show us what they've got. I'm thinking of all kinds of young people from my past when I say that. But to drive the point home, let's reflect for a moment on one group, those undocumented young people who for the past 6 years have raised their hands when asked if they'd be willing to give the American government documents showing that they were brought here 5 years before or more as a child, undocumented. Would they commit to staying in school and working and then give back to society through their labor and their citizenship and, yes, their taxes? And all these kids said yes, even though they were undocumented and perhaps had many reasons not to give the government of the United States information that could be used to send them home. But they believe so much in this country, so much that thousands raised their hand and said, I want to be here. 800,000. Think about that. That's the future of America. I know so many DACA recipients, and there's no single story. They are from Africa, from Asia, from Central and South America, from Europe. The ones I know have gone to the schools where I've worked and earned top grades and led clubs and sent monies home to their family. They've dealt with the fear of being deported, perhaps deported, for their families at least, deported to becoming disappeared. And they push forward, despite the frustration of not being able to speak up against injustice sometimes because the risk is just too great. These are some of our greatest Americans, these young people. They are family-loving, law-abiding, degree-attaining, job-holding, business-creating, English-speaking, tax-paying, patriotic, new Americans who most legislators say they love while they let them languish in a legal no man's land because some other fix is always more important. The dreamers are exemplary, but they are also representative of the greatness all across our opportunity youth. It's critical that we see and listen to the young holistically, that we who are older work in every way we can in partnership with them to create the futures they would like to have for themselves and for our society, and not just inherit, but help to build. Which leads me to my second story about a group of young people who inspired me this past summer. It happened right here in Aspen, Colorado, when the Aspen Institute convened a panel where young people spoke about gun violence. Two young women from Parkland, Florida, and one young man from Chicago shared stories of how gunshots ripped holes in the bodies of loved ones right in front of them and ripped holes in their own souls as survivors. They were survivors first of violence, and then secondly, of apathy and cynicism and denial. The young women from Parkland, Kayla Schaefer and Olivia Wesh, said they doubted they would ever feel safe at school again. The young man from Chicago, Keyshawn Newman, said the only place he feels safe because of the violence on the streets is in his school. It was powerful to hear young people who have experienced very different manifestations of gun access and gun violence reach for common ground and common cause that day. Each heard and validated the other's experiences. And yet, this panel veered off in a disturbing direction, and for a surprising reason. You see, the moderator, a famous older journalist, showed absolutely no empathy for these kids with his questions and his comments. He kept asking these brave youth how they presumed to think, as mere teenagers, that their ideas would have any impact on gun violence in this country. It was as if his desire was to make them feel small and invisible. I think he was trying to come off as fair-minded and tough, the way journalists do, but to me and many others, he just looked cold and cynical. Kids did the best they could in that circumstance. At the end of the discussion, though, we saw an antidote to that cynicism of an older generation. As the journalist was leaving the stage, 3 teenagers from this area, from rural Colorado, came running up and hugged Kayla, Olivia, and Keyshawn. There were tears in their eyes, but smiles on their faces. You see, these teenagers from here in Colorado had suffered in yet another way, losing 5 peers in their school over the past 18 months due to gun-enabled suicide. These 3 groups of teenagers, the future of our country, came together that night, rural, urban, and suburban. They shared their pain and their fears. Each was a survivor, and each chose to confront the trauma they had experienced by giving voice to it and hopefully making something regenerative from tragedies that harmed their hearts but not their goodness. They said they wanted change. I say this: if those teenagers can have the courage to step forward against cynicism and join hands, if the dreamers can have the courage to raise their hands and risk their all for education and opportunity, if the 16-year-olds I told you at the start of this speech can have the courage to hold each other across the supposed divides of difference in hopes of a better day, if all those talented young people in your communities can continue to be what Dr. King called drum majors for justice with your mentoring and your support, if these kids can do that, then surely we who are here and we who are older can put our bodies and hearts and minds in motion to take down the special interest and meet the needs of the young for today and for tomorrow as a preferential option for what it means to be a good society that cares for its youngest. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for making me happy.
Can I give you this to get to Christian?
All right, so we're just doing a small set change or shift. And in addition to Dan being on stage with us, we also now have Shawnice Jackson and Jamiel Alexander, who I think for most of you need no introduction. Shawnice and Jamiel have been with us and with the Aspen Forum from day one. And so I want to thank you for your leadership, for all that you're doing, and for joining the conversation this morning. Two things. One, Dan, thank you so much for your remarks and for being with us and for the amount of time that you are giving us. I think it is reflective of the belief that you have in the importance of our work.
Yeah, this is just the beginning. You're doing the work. I'm just joining in to be a part. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And also, I want to sit here and say thank you to Steve for this morning. As a personal thank you. I saw so many faces and the reaction, and I think it was a moment that was needed. And thank you for your thoughtfulness and your empathy and your sensitivity to the fact that it was needed. So thank you for that. What I want to do, and I'm going to give you all an opportunity in about half an hour to join in the conversation, but I want to start out with the conversation here on the stage. And I want to start out with the place where personal and professional meet as we think about leadership and the leadership that you all bring to your work when you go back home to your communities and the leadership you bring in so many different ways. And Dan, I want to start with you. And you touched on it. We saw a little bit of it in the clip as you were starting that exchange with David Bradley here at the Aspen Ideas Festival this summer. And you were referring to the way that you grew up. And starting with that, and also thinking of your many professional accomplishments that Jamiel shared with us, I want you to tell us how the personal and the professional have led to the shaping of your vision for impact and what you want to do and what you hope to do at the Aspen Institute.
That's a big question. And I guess I would say, and my apologies for my voice too, because I would say that I had three discrete stages of my life, in a sense, if you meld the personal and professional. The first stage of it was like 0 to 15, when I grew up in Baltimore City, child in the 60s, saw desegregation, racism, beloved community firsthand, lived it in the different neighborhoods I was a part of, was raised by a single mom who went to college at night, who got her degree when I was getting my 6th grade degree from Towson College, and then kept going like single women do, single moms when they're getting degrees, got the next one, a master's degree when I was in high school, and got the next one, a PhD when I was in college, wrote some books about the history of women in the West, starting with prostitutes in the West. She kind of remade history to some extent, which is what happens when people who get opportunity come from backgrounds where they're not the privileged group. They see the world differently, and they contribute then to the larger body of knowledge that we have as a society. My mom grew up in foster care for 14 years, and so she had a pretty challenging life, and she saw the light in the darkness constantly. Was exposed to that. Those first 15 years was hands-on seeing and living social realities in all sorts of ways. Second phase, I was maybe 16 to 30. In that phase, I would say I was working hands-on at the grassroots level with, out of an excitement, a passion for working with kids and learning and growing and flourishing from that engagement. I taught basketball teams I put together that were made up of African American and white kids and played in then all black or all white leagues when I was late in high school, early in college. I then worked with court supervised students, Opportunity Youth in DC. I was running a whole lot of programs out of my dorm room where I was sending my friends into juvenile correction facilities and group homes and doing Big Brother, Big Sister programs. And then I started working with recently arrived immigrants from Central America who were walking up or riding on the roofs of trains in order to get away from death squads in Guatemala and El Salvador and try to find some little bit of safety for their kids, which anybody in this room would do too. Heroes. And so I was seeing, and then I taught in prison. So I was doing that kind of work for about 15 years. And then the third stage was working with institutions. And I won't go into detail here except to say that I felt as if that my life story, what I'd seen and known firsthand as a human being, and then the incredible passion and joy and love that I felt working with kids and communities to help make change and empower kids, should be brought, if I could do it, to the level of structures and systems and institutions and society. And that takes the will and the skill to move institutions. You have to learn from mentors. You have to try to focus on getting results. You have to nudge and push and come up with new ideas, just like you've done in government. And I think that makes sense to try to work at both the direct human level and at the structural and systemic level. And what I was able to find in the college setting is I could do both. When I worked in government in the Clinton administration, I pretty much was working, at like the level of the federal government. Making differences that matter. Elections have consequences. We put a lot of power in people's hands, in my opinion, in the first 4 years of the Clinton administration. But in college, working in college, I had the ability to work directly, hands-on with kids of incredible talent from backgrounds like the ones I described. Get them into college, give them the opportunity to shine. At the same time, also, to draw the lessons from that work, to tell the stories of the kids, to gather the data of their success, and to push society to open up more doors at more schools besides my own for more kids like the Opportunity Youth I was working with. And that's where I am right now. What's going to happen with Aspen? More focus on kids, more focus on results, more focus on justice, but they're already doing a pretty good job here, so I'm just privileged to be here. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. Jamiel and Shawnice, the same question for you all in thinking about the personal, the professional, and how that's led you to the kind of success that you've had to date. I mean, both of you all are tremendous leaders across networks and across the movement. So how have those two things combined for you all?
Okay. A few things come to mind for me personally when I reflect on one, where I've been, and two, where I am now. First, the journey itself, from poverty to Opportunity Youth to a program participant to a program leader to a national leader representing that program, from national leader to youth practitioner, from youth practitioner to a policy advocate, and essentially now a youth development expert. I feel like personally, I really learned how to be tenacious, how to advocate for myself, how to advocate for others, the importance of self-agency. But as a whole and professionally, I know that I wouldn't be here without, one, a willingness to grow, two, a willingness to step out of my comfort zone, building social capital, building networks, and having amazing mentors. Some of them are in this room now, like Shakima, Zed, Yelena, Mo. I appreciate all of you guys. So that's how I think of it.
Thank you. Definitely intertwined.
Oh, man. So I did write some things down, and I love coming from the heart, but I want to make sure I'm real as well. So before, Ms. Mel, I want to thank you. And I know people don't even realize it, doing your work during the administration and then your willingness to take the charge from the White House and bring it to Aspen. I've been blessed to kind of grow under you. And a lot of people don't realize, you said it in your remarks, your special interest was the young people. And there are some young there are adult your allies, and and as I grow, realize that there are some hidden agendas. So I want to thank you and respect you, even with the team and trusting us to like transition and what, you know what, Mo, you got this. You see what I'm saying? That says a lot about you as a woman. And for you to kind of make that move, I respect you tremendously. Okay, love. Should I still say my notes? Because that was like professional and personal. Like,
No,
say
you
them.
wanna, yeah, please.
Okay. So as a young leader, participant back in Youth Build AmeriCorps, I know now that it kind of rooted me as a community organizer, social change agent, serving on the student policy government, and the following year as a VISTA supervisor for those who are still in this comprehensive program. It really planted the seed of nothing for us without us. As a participant, I, at the particular time in the student body, we advocated for open lunch, right? Created template questions for the prospective new hires for staff, various community service projects, and that personal and that professional kind of intertwined, because service, I tell people, it went from a punitive measure through the courts to it being purposeful for my life, right? And during this era, charter schools were looked down upon, and I often felt like we weren't at the table. So with the student policy, we literally went to the school district. We went to the school district and really started advocating for themselves. And I started realizing, even just kind of listening and understanding policies on that level, I felt like I was back in juvie. We were literally just the number, charter schools versus public schools. So that really kind of started being, as a young leader, just kind of after that, you know, just 12 years of direct service, just kind of offered me the opportunity to serve with Sister Shawnice and others for the National Council of Young Leaders as a founder member. You already know that. And it would literally, you know, the brother and sisterhood amongst us, just those shared experiences, like, you know what, we can't have, and just kind of going back to what you said, like, it just cannot happen. So what can we do in our power, in our privilege, and what we have to kind of create? So we created the documentation as far as, you know, the recommendations, increase opportunities and decrease poverties, and it was really one of those living a collective platform for us to kind of be intentional with our advocacy and just really educating. And it was like, to me, it was just kind of natural, like just going through, you know, to bring back the Aspen, like we were literally rooted. Like our roots was already there, so it was almost like as we kind of went to our various communities, we began to branch out, and then of course the community action teams literally sprung up from that. So it was a mix and match of both to me.
Well, and I want to pick up from there, because you were talking about the community action teams and the work that's happening in communities all over the country right now, the work that we are collectively doing. And I want you all to think about what advice you might want to give to this room around collaboration. Because we know the challenges that bring. And in many ways, in the same way that you all have had very different experiences that bring you all to this work and to this moment, when we all go back home, we're working with lots of different organizations and institutions as we're thinking about systems change. And that requires collaboration. So I'm wondering, what kind of advice do you give from the work that you've done to this room about doing that and doing that well?
So I'll go first. Work hard to build a wider and wider tent, a more inclusive tent. Find the people that, and the organizations, the institutions that are not only the obvious partners, but the ones that are a little bit less obvious, and go meet with them and talk with them and see if you can get them involved. Build a wider circle, wider and wider circle of engaged and active leaders. That's one thing. I think also really working to be able to frame a problem in such a way that you can then show progress, that we can show progress, and then with results, with a positive demonstration that proves the possible, then push out your message even more. Tell people in your communities that we're getting it done. It's different now. We're making gains. Join us. I think those two things, widen the network, get with three things, get results, and tell your story.
And Dan, I'm just curious from your experience, because you've been at a lot of big institutions, and I know from government, from working in university settings, it can be challenging. Is there a particular experience that you think about or draw from that aligns with the things that you were just thinking about?
I'll say two fast. One was when I was working in the Clinton administration. I worked for the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Donna Shalala, and she put me in charge of a project that didn't have a name to try to help make more difference for young people across this sprawling department with the NIH, the FDA, the CDC, the Administration for Children, Youth, and Families, all these different parts, this giant, vast government. In fact, it was bigger than every government in the world except the US government in Germany, I think, HHS. And so we listened, we got out there, we listened, we came back, and we framed our work in a way that allowed everybody to do a part. It was called Safe Passages. The goal was not to raise teenagers ourselves as the government, but to put power in the hands of people that love kids, their families, their teachers, their community advocates, put power in their hands to help navigate their kids through the rocky waters of adolescence into secure adult lives. And that meant looking at tobacco, looking at early teenage sexual behavior, looking at drug use, looking at unemployment, looking at health, student health, all these different things. We brought it together with a big theme that forced all the different entities at HHS to join, to do their part. We had these regular meetings, one called Words and one called Deeds. What are we all saying about how we're going to make Safe Passage more available to more kids, and what actions are we taking in order to make that possible? Words and deeds, constantly. That's how you build a campaign. But you have to have, I think, that big, integrative, inviting theme that brings people to the table. I won't tell the second story, but I'll come back later if it's relevant. Thank you.
Sounds good. Shawnice, collaboration.
So my advice around collaboration is really geared towards youth practitioners, youth-adult partnerships, and those really supporting youth leadership, whether it be, a youth council, that type of thing. I would encourage you to consider 3 critical areas in 3 critical ways. So the areas are starting, supporting, and sustaining. So how are you entering the lives of young people? How are you growing your young people? And how are you transitioning your young people? Mm-hmm. And then the ways I would ask you to think about those areas are your intention, your impact, and your authenticity. So,
Can you say that one more time, sis? Can you say that one more again?
So essentially your why, your what, and your how you're going about it. Intention, impact, and authenticity. And some things to consider during each stage, whether it's entering, growing, or transitioning your young people, considering things like, are my young people educated or are they informed? Are they surviving or are they thriving? Good. Are they valued or are they worthless? Do they feel empowered or do they feel entitled? Are they heard or are they told? Are they bitter or are they better? And at the end of the day, have they experienced growth or stagnation?
That's great. And I know there are communities out there that have been focusing exactly on that and seen in their work, we haven't been doing that, so how do we turn it around and taking very serious critical steps to do that and to bring youth to the table as partners in an authentic way. So thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah.
Jamiel, what would you add to that?
I think Mr. Dan and Sister Shawnie, y'all said it as you were speaking, and I was going to refer to my notes, but just Mother Teresa came to mind. I can't do what you can do, you can't do what I can do, but together we can do great things. Mm-hmm. So appreciate you, that authenticity. You already know our struggle, and thank you for that, Shawnie. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Well, collaboration, but that also sits beside, and you talk about words and deeds. Yeah. And thinking about words, thinking about complex communications. Yeah. That's another one of the challenges that we all face in the work that we're doing. And I know you're thinking about that here at the Aspen Institute, Dan. How do we make the whole greater than the sum of the parts, particularly when we're working in complex systems that have lots of parts to them? Yeah. So I'm wondering if you can pull back the curtain for us a bit and tell us how you're thinking about doing that here in a way that may also translate to the kind of work that we're doing back in communities around the country.
Well, I like, Shawnice, a lot the way you were framing the asset-based approach to kids, because words do matter, and we convey attitudes through the way we frame the approach we're taking to problems. So it takes time to listen. When I started at Franklin and Marshall College, 5% of the student body identified as Pell Grant, meaning they were in the lower 35% or so of household incomes. We were able to triple that number fast, and we were also able to really see amazing results. For example, when we tripled the Pell Grant population the first year, we had a 98% first to second year retention rate. Every single Pell Grant student but 2 came back for sophomore year. Same grades as the student body as a whole. Now we've got 6 or 7 years of it, and so we see graduation rates for Pell Grant students at or above student body as a whole. 2 years ago, the Pell Grant students were overrepresented. A higher percentage of the students in Summa and Magna Cum Laude at graduation were Pell Grant students. Last year, it was my last graduation, and
Good way to leave.
a good way to leave, along with getting a chance to stand next to Mayor Cory Booker as he was giving the commencement speech. The 4-year graduation rate for the biggest group of African American students ever to matriculate at F&M, it was at least double. 4-year graduation rate, we statistics are 6 years, was 91%. Well, here's the key thing. The student body as a whole was 83%.
Wow.
The African American students outperformed student body as a whole. Doesn't surprise me, super talented. And that's the point. We organized our work under one key concept, which was talent. We believed that talent was equally distributed all across America, and it was our job as educators to get out to the schools and communities and neighborhoods and meet the educators who are getting kids ready for college successfully, and meet the kids and their families, and to develop together a vision that our school could be the best in the country for the first in the family to go to college, the best. And then if we were really good at that, and we know we weren't going to be in the promised land on day one, but if we got good fast, we would then tell all the other schools that thought it was impossible to do, or you had to hire a social worker for every student or whatever, just give the kids scholarships and critical mass of students, along with a little bit of respect and inclusion, and you watch them take off. That's right. And that's what happened. Now, I start with that to say, now I'm leading this new giant entity. It's like this alternative U.S. government, actually. 60 programs, everything from climate change to cybersecurity to opportunity youth, public health, so much more. The first thing, just like at F&M, is to listen, to get out, to see the programs, take part, engage with the people that work at the Institute, survey, literally formally survey the Board of Trustees, the employees of the Institute, to hear from them. What do they believe is the absolutely great purpose that we can have tomorrow for the world that we are inheriting? What can we do that is audacious and big and bold, a version of what we did at Franklin and Marshall College? It's a little school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, home of the whoopie pie. We said, why can't we be the best in the country and then catalyze more schools to do what we did, which is exactly what has been happening. And so I don't know yet the exact themes, but I know that you have to listen to the people that have a stake in the organization, the employees, those we serve, the board, the donors, to listen closely. And what I'm committed to is a big and bold vision. I didn't leave like heaven on earth, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in order to come here and not make big impacts.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
In thinking about big impact and communications, I mean, one of the things that we all know that we are dealing with and that we are committed to is narrative change. And that sits in the context of a 400-500-year narrative of privilege and supremacy, white privilege and supremacy, and the desire and the sense of urgency around creating a new narrative and a counter narrative that has to dismantle that simultaneously. And Jamiel and Shawnice, I want to start with you and then come back to Dan and have you, again, offer some advice based on the work that you're doing across the networks on a national level, also on a local level, about ways that we think about that piece of the communications objective that we have and creating that new narrative and what you have found to be the most compelling ways to do it. And if you also have thought about it, ways that you think are not bearing fruit for us as we try and shift the narrative. Daniel, do you want to start my side?
Okay. This is why I don't like notes, because I got to keep going back and forth, to be honest with you. So, long story short, you talk about narrative change, and I want to actually reverberate what you said as far as this was actually what I was going to talk about relationships as far as going into that space. So thank you, being with the people themselves. So you talk about narrative change. As a national council, as we kind of form and organize, we started realizing, and just kind of personally, let's talk about the power of voting. You know, in my community, and just being raised like I didn't want to be a part of the political game because I felt like, you know, we weren't being whole. Why? Right? So as we began to start sharing our collective stories with these sponsoring organizations, we literally felt in that particular room in Boston back then that, you know, poverty was created for specific outcomes. And in those outcomes, we literally realized that it was targeted around Black and brown people, you know? And with that being said, we began to organize and start really talking about these systems of poverty and changes of education, up mobility, criminal justice, community development, family supports, and as far as the recommendations themselves. And like I said, it was a living platform, but at the same time, we were literally changing the narrative as we go, because going back into our communities, I had my aha moment, but I was still on the block like, no, like, why? Like, why vote? And then it was almost the connection I really felt like that we really had during the time between 08 and 2012. It was, everybody was excited about a man of color being in office. So to me, that literally gave me a conversation starter as far as like, why vote? And as we began to be in these spaces and me making sure that I stay connected and grounded, we literally started hearing things. Like, you know, let's talk about this criminal justice system, Mill. Like, you know, this is when Michelle Alexander was big and people were really becoming conscious around the prisoner pipeline. And then we literally came back as a council like, you know what, we need to make this white paper. And there was the narrative shift within our communities going back home. And then it kind of branched from that. And I don't want to go too deeper in that because we're going to have a little preliminary later on that. But the Reconnecting campaign with OIN, it became like the Aspen trees. we all literally did our own thing in our particular spaces, but we were still rooted. So, and here we are now with a whole white paper, Tufts University survey participant within the community. Like, you know, now we realize the power that we have through the votes. You know, so.
So it's both an internal change,
Yes, ma'am.
recognizing the power that existed, as well as an external narrative that we have power,
Yes, ma'am.
and we're going to exercise it to make a change and to create a shift.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Jamiel wholeheartedly. I feel like as both youth leaders and youth practitioners, we've really been focusing on narrative change and kind of looking at it in two ways. One, kind of like leading the charge when it comes to narrative change for opportunity youth, and two, leveraging the power of positive narratives when it comes to opportunity youth. So when we think about leading, what that kind of looks like for us is being the change via the National Council of Young Leaders on the national level as well as the local level back in our communities at home, educating not just our peers but everybody on the rebrand, you know, the potential of opportunity youth, not just, you know, at-risk, disconnected youth, but really letting people know that we are opportunity youth. And also advocating for more opportunities for opportunity youth with the rationale that more opportunities would lead to more lives impacted, which leads to essentially a cultural shift, which leads to a narrative shift.
And Dan, I want to come to you on this question as well. And I have to say, going back to the video, one of the reasons I think we collectively felt it important to show that video is because it wasn't that you came here and said that.
That's right.
Is that you said that at the Aspen Ideas Festival.
Yeah. The elite.
Right, and some of you may have been there, many of you have not, but you said that to people who have a lot of privilege. People who many need to have that framework reshaped and shaken. And you very purposefully and intentionally put that out there. So we thought that that was important to also speak to what's in your heart on this issue.
You know, I was so crazy about speaking on that stage to that audience. And afterwards, I was very pleased with how it went. This person runs up to me. She self-identified as a liberal. She said, I worked for President Obama. I'm liberal. I won't say more about her identity, but she said, I'm liberal. I'm like, great, okay, cool. She says,
It wasn't me.
she said, you can't say that stuff about white privilege. This is I believe in it, but you can't say it. Don't you realize we have to win back people that don't believe in white privilege? You make them feel awkward when you say that. You shouldn't talk like that. I thought, my God, I'm so privileged now I can't even be privileged anymore. So I think there's 2 points here. One is use your voice. Use your voice. You only have one. Use your voice. Use it. Develop it. You can try things out. Today I tried out 2 things. I hope that the idea of a preferential option for the young is a good idea and I can run with that, but I wanted to hear what you thought. That's why I used that term for the first time. And I also said something about a new social contract. Again, I'm not positive yet what that means, but I think that might be a framing, those 2 ideas, maybe a framing that we can run with. I don't know. We'll find out. We'll learn together by listening when we talk. Revising if we think we're off a little bit. But that's the big point, is be authentic and come out with what you feel, because the people need to hear truth. Trump doesn't hold back. He says everything he thinks and feels. He doesn't censor himself in the slightest. Took him all the way to the White House. So why can't we? Say what we think. Say what we mean. Be direct. Be honest. Be respectful. That's what he's not. Don't demonize people, but say what we mean. And then with that, listen, so that if you don't say it quite right the first time, take it back and start again. Yeah. Reframe it. Listen. Nobody gets it right out of the box.
And I think also, to your point, we have to get beyond the fragility that maintains the silence.
Yeah. I've been all over rural Pennsylvania. My school ran something called the College Advising Corps in 25 communities all across rural Pennsylvania. And I went out to all these schools and met all these kids who, some of them said to me, oh yeah, we have a wedding, we put on our fatigues and bring our rifles and go off to the wedding. And they were proud, and they were telling me that happy, and I was happy they were telling me. And some of those kids went to Franklin and Marshall College. And one of them, named Sheldon Ruby, won a Wrangell Scholarship, and they've got a full scholarship to Georgetown, did a Fulbright in Indonesia, living with a Muslim family. Why do we just write people off and say, oh, well, you're from there, so I guess I know what you are? Let's get out there and engage, especially with the young. Engage, build the bridges across all the supposed divides of identity.
Before we go to the audience, I want to ask you all one last question that is connected directly, but different from the substantive issues that we talk about. And that is the issue of self-care, which is also another critical issue when we think about and exercise leadership, and how you all provide for yourselves self-care. How do you get up and do the challenging work that you do every day? Because every day isn't awesome. Every day is certainly not easy, and there are hits to the gut that we all take every day when we do our work, particularly when you care deeply. So, Jamiel, I'll start with you. Self-care.
And I almost feel like that's that personal, professional as well. You know, faith, family, and family beyond the blood, because like, this is my family. Like OIU, OIF, these young people are my family. Like me realizing who I am and how I'll have to transition and giving them that space, how I can be a supportive, not with special interests, but to figure out like, what do you want to do and how can I help? So faith, family, and nurturing and nurture, which I've actually grown to appreciate. My wife and I, 2 years, we bought a house, right? So long story short, we inherited a grapevine. And then that grapevine has literally gave me patience. And then the missus, she literally planted a garden. So I've literally learned how, with the 4 seasons, whether it be with the roses, the tulips, the fruits, the vegetables, like it really has brought me to another place of healing. So I want to thank her for that. She is here. She told me not to blow her up. So that was something, like I just learned. You know, I learned as far as nature, and then you already know we were Aspen, so I appreciate it more. So coming from the concrete jungle, like I've literally embraced it. I've really embraced it.
Actually, Dan, you next.
I think I get probably like a D+ in self-care. 'Cause I actually love pushing this body as far as I can push it, as hard as I can. And I get a lot of pleasure out of that because it's all about working with kids and people. And I have a great family. My wife and I have an incredible relationship, 3 daughters. So at some level, I feel maybe it's not good, but I feel like I've been on automatic now, just pushing. And I think maybe in general, it's nice to have a broad enough value set so that you define yourself from your relationships first and foremost, and that the work you do, you value and enjoy and grow from. Find the joy and pleasure in it. But I think doing good work, really good work that's needed, work that's a calling, like all of you, that actually is a big old reservoir you can draw upon all the time for having given your best. And so one form of self-care is keep making a difference.
Shawnice, in the spirit of the way Steve led us this morning, turn to a woman leader to talk about self-care before we go to the audience.
Absolutely. So I feel like I learned about self-care the hard way after experiencing, kind of doing direct service, experiencing burnout, experiencing compassion fatigue, and really getting so stuck in helping others that I forgot to help myself. So I really like what you said earlier. I feel like trauma is constantly happening to us. I feel like we're constantly in a state of either healing from trauma or experiencing new trauma, whether it be individual or collective. So I've been trying to think about self-care as a process. And during this process, I feel like everyone needs positive coping skills, resources, and supports to really honor and heal your whole self when it comes to self-care. For me, my process has been of letting go and grasping on. So letting go of stigmas like, Black people don't go to therapy, or, you can pray everything away. Letting go of social expectations, where women have to, serve everybody and make sure everyone else is okay. Letting go of negative, coping skills, like it's not cool, drinking wine every night after work. You shouldn't be that stressed out. And really grasping onto my personal self-care needs and permission, and really giving myself grace, forgiveness, and patience as I take the self-care journey.
So this is what we're going to do for a few minutes. I'm going to give you all, 4 minutes or so to think about the questions that you may have for the panel and engage with those at your table about what resonated with you that you heard up here. And then we'll come back for about 10 minutes and give you all an opportunity to ask a few questions of the panel. So, please.
I get nervous looking at papers, that's all. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. You're
the best.
That was really good.
So, well, I think what time is it exactly? I should look much. I need to ideally be on by, I would say, 9:35 is ideal, but 9:40 even. I'll just keep us over by probably 5 minutes. We'll go over. I just need 10 minutes to do it.
No, I knew that. I thought I was accounting for that.
Right.
Okay. So you need to be on by 9:40?
At the very latest. The earlier you can get me on, the better. Like even like 9:38, and I'll try to. I have about 10 minutes of talking points.
Okay. Okay. So we'll just do. I'll give them 1 minute questions. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for
Interesting. Okay. So guys, would you just, I don't have any time up here, could you just let me know when I need to, in 2 minutes when I need to? So like 9:31? Yeah.
I was lucky and I scratched the instrument from government. Government early enough so that I was like able to then decide higher ed was where I wanted to really significant time. Now it's nonprofit. So a little bit of everything.
We got off on the timekeeping, so we're gonna have to hold them back in. We don't want to do like 5 or 6.
Thoughtful questions. Thank you.
What?
Were you trying to get a picture of Ms. Mel?
Misunderstood. We're good. Yeah.
I think that
Okay.
your opening comment was
Everyone, can I have your attention?
really was fantastic.
Everyone, can I have your attention, please? So we got a little bit off in timekeeping, so I'm sorry to cut this portion short and the Q&A short, but to stay on schedule, we're going to come back now and give you all an opportunity. We'll find out if we've got a couple of questions for the panel. So raise your hand, and what I'll do, depending on how many there are, is we'll just take a few all together and then have the panel respond. So that way we'll try and get responses. I see a question this table here. We'll start there. Anyone else have a question? Okay, the question here. And is that?
Good morning, everyone. So given that this is the 12th convening, I would be interested in learning from each of the panelists, what is inspiring you to keep pursuing greater outcomes for Opportunity Youth?
Okay, so what inspires to continue to get great outcomes for OY? And then question here.
Hi, Dan, I really liked your language about preferential option for young people, and I think that is going to need a huge cultural shift, so how do we get there?
And then there is a question here. I'm sorry, was there a question here? Okay.
I'm wondering about how do you push the envelope and kind of get folks convinced who don't see youth as our most important resource, who kind of aren't already in this amazing choir.
Great. All righty. Okay, I think we can grab one more. I'll take this question here.
Thanks. So this is for Dan. One of the things that we were struck by was the social construct, the idea of repairing or creating a new social construct. And one of the questions that came up was really sort of how do we measure that and how do we actually approach that, given that this is sort of a recycling of a theme, if you will. Yep. So what do we do differently now? Yep.
All righty. Okay, so how do we continue, how are we inspired 12 convenings in to try and continue to get great outcomes for Opportunity Youth? The culture shift that goes along with the preferential option that you talked about, Dan. How do we push the envelope to get the wider world to understand and see youth as an important, as a critical, young adults as a critical resource, and then the social construct, how to measure it, and how to approach that. So I will turn to you all. I was giving you all a few. That was my dance, to give you all a few minutes to think, to see who might want to take on any of those questions.
And I had a through line, because I actually wrote that down in my notes when you were talking. The preferential option, that's how we began. Like, the young people were first. Like, nothing was for us. So the leadership concept, and that has been a constant inspiration in a way where, as we transition as more adult allies, and just realizing the fact that these systems are still in place, like the work has just begun. So just to kind of make that, that's what keep me inspired and keep me grounded and humble. And the fact that I have a daughter that started 9th grade, like, there's no way in the world where I have to do more. Like, when it's all said and done, she's literally casting in the world. Like, so I wanted to make that through line between the two because, yeah, since day one, the young people, equity and justice for all has been the core of the Forum for Community Solutions. So that was just two connections.
The through line. And how do we push that out into the broader culture to help more people realize that than those of us doing this work and our allies at home?
So I guess I would say, I'm not sure I can answer all those questions because they're deep. There's like a book in there, I think, a whole book. But the asset-based approach of showing that young people are a collection of gifts and talents and drives and potential, love, and understanding. The asset-based approach is what inspires, I think. We see our kids as a collection of assets, beauty. And then second, I think that asset approach can be translated into practical terms by looking at what are the drivers of a good society, which include a strong economy, a voting public, accountability for government, and an investment of the people in a shared understanding of where we're going, and that we have to take the asset of the youth, including the youth themselves, out and develop a public narrative, to go back to your theme, with business, with government, with community groups, that young people truly are the greatest asset this country has, and the only one that's going to get us through the problems that include lack of people ready to work, to pay for Social Security and Medicare for those that are retiring, the biggest generation ever, and a lack of understanding in society about how we can create we and not us versus them. Right. I truly believe that young people are the answer to at least those two questions. They're also the ones that are going to have the longest carbon footprint. So they're a part of climate change too. So I would say both an inspiration from who our young people are, and then practical outreach so that we can show the power in society across many groups that investing in the young is not just the right thing, but the smart thing for our country's future.
Shawnice will give you the last word.
Sure. I just wanted to speak to the question about what keeps you inspired and pushing forward for Opportunity Youth. I guess seeing what's on the opposite side of not having a positive opportunity, seeing the urgency and really realizing that it is a life or death situation for some people.
That's right.
Feeling extremely personally connected to it, having it impact my friends and my family, my community, the people that I care deeply about, and also just knowing my history, knowing the lineage that I come from, the history of leadership, courage, and power. I just owe it to my ancestors to stay optimistic and to keep going.
Go ahead. It's in our DNA.
I don't think I have to say anything more. We're going to end with that. Please join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you.
And now Monique Miles will come and close us out and transition us.
Please join me again in thanking our panelists. So I am committed to trying to close this out on time. I want to start by formally introducing myself. My name is Monique Miles, and I'm the director of the Opportunity Youth. I'm the director of the Aspen Institute Forum Deputy Director of the Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions and Director of the Opportunity Youth Forum. Thank you. So Dan, I've actually been waiting for this moment because from the first time ever that I've heard you speak, it has deeply resonated with me, the story that you tell about your mom. It resonates with me personally, and it also connects so deeply to the work that we did start here 6 years ago. So personally, for those of you who don't know me, I'm originally from Harlem, New York. I was born to a single mom. I am one of 5. As a small child and even now as an adult, it was never for one moment lost on me the sacrifices and hard work my mom did daily and demonstrated daily because of her commitment to giving her children opportunity. I'm so personally thankful always and so encouraged and inspired always to hear your story. And then professionally, what resonates with me also is that we have always, from the beginning of this work, described it as intergenerational, multi-generational. And so when you tell the story of your mom's achievement vis-a-vis your own achievement and how much it has impacted and intersected your career, I also feel like that is such a frame and value we hold as a network. And so then professionally, it just resonates so much. Thank you again for being here with us. So I'm excited to join the ranks of Melody and Dan and Steve to officially welcome you all to our 12th convening in Aspen. Hard to believe we are here. And I want to say that I'm personally excited to be here because while I really love and appreciate all of the support I receive from so many partners and friends from across this network, I did truly miss being with you all in Seattle. Because see, as the Aspen metaphor that Steve shared at the top of his comments reminds us, our convenings have always been a place to catch up and connect, to share strategies and work through challenges. And maybe most importantly, these convenings have been a place to deepen our shared affinities for our young people, for our communities, and for the vision we hold regarding our aspiration for what it is our country can collectively be when we set our agendas together. Our time at these convenings is aimed to sharpen our focus on everything from designing effective pathways to education and employment for our young people, to the advocacy and organizing work that both Jamiel and Shawnice so eloquently spoke to leveraging public dollars to support youth-led change and the pathways so many community leaders around the room are working towards. And at the same time, it's about fortifying and nurturing ourselves and each other across our networks and across the broader movement. And so in the spirit of acknowledgments, particularly around progress and what it is we're able to achieve when we come together and we convene, I really actually wanted to start by acknowledging some progress across our network. Now, I don't have enough time to acknowledge every single community, and I regret that I don't have the ability to do that. At the same time, I just want to lift up a couple of quick stories of progress, and particularly for you if you're new, just so that you have a sense of what is the work of these collaboratives, what is the work of these communities. So I'm going to ask you to just hold your applause to the end, but then in the end, I will ask you to join me. So recently in Los Angeles, our partners there have secured approximately $2 million from the Department of Children and Family Services to support pathways for system-involved youth. In Chicago, the collaborative secured resources from the mayor to support re-engagement efforts, which continues to deepen the community-wide commitment to improving outcomes for opportunity youth. In Greenville, Mississippi, the collaborative was recently awarded $500,000, which included earmarked dollars by Walmart Foundation to work for adjudicated youth. And this is part of the mayor's expungement program. So not only does this reward reflect a new layer of commitment to opportunity youth, but it also expands the talent pipeline locally to include juvenile offenders and really essentially add to the talent pool of the local economy. And in Boston, the birthplace of re-engagement, the collaborative secured an investment from the Barr Foundation to conduct another segmentation analysis of the school district, which is critical to drive the next stage of K-12 dropout prevention and recovery across the city. As so many people here who know the story of re-engagement in Boston, the birthplace again, where it all began, this is not only important to the work of reconnecting K-12, but it ties to their reconnection agenda, which specifically that center focuses on connections to post-secondary and employment. In Oakland, going back across the country now, in Oakland and Alameda County, young leaders completed a summer community safety initiative program that included community participatory action research project, which led to violence prevention in the community. But very specifically, what it led to was the creation of the city's first Department of Violence Prevention for the city of Oakland. This is critical to thinking about the security and wellness, not just of our young people, but the whole community. And at the same time, I would be remiss if I didn't share that Oakland continues to deepen their work with local post-secondary partners that's aimed at strengthening what they have named the prison to college pipeline for formerly incarcerated opportunity youth. In Hopi, the collaborative is working with 13 partners, including the Tribal Enrollment Office, Social Services, Ancestral Lands, and Adventures for Hopi, to sign data sharing MOUs. This work is critical to the long-term wellness for Opportunity Youth and the overall health of the community, including informing accurate post-secondary attainment numbers for students from the res population. And then finally, I want to focus on Opportunity Works, this initiative that we launched back in 2014. So as many of you know, Jobs for the Future, in partnership with the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions, launched this initiative led by Lily Allen that has been aimed at building the evidence base of what works to improve post-secondary attainment for Opportunity Youth, with an emphasis on boys and men of color. These communities that participate include Boston, Hartford, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Santa Clara, San Francisco, and South King County in Washington State. The initiative is beginning to wind down, but as it is so critical to lift up and declare the extraordinary success and achievements of this effort. I want to share with you some persistent rates. So over 2,000 Opportunity Youth have been served through 2 phases of the Back on Track model, including the enriched preparation phase and the post-secondary bridging support phase. And approximately half of those people served, young people served, were boys and men of color. Those young people receiving enriched prep services had a 97% persistence rate. Over 750 of those young people earned a secondary credential, and over 1,000 of them, approximately half of them serve, enter into post-secondary education and training, and we are seeing a 70% rate in post-secondary bridging. So this harkens back to some of Dan's comments. But let me also say this. This work is changing the outcomes of what our young people can achieve when they receive the right coupling of instruction and supports. And let us not forget, please, what Miss Cleo Parker Robinson reminded us of last night in the ensemble titled Uncle. I want to quote what they said. Our boys are seen as problems before possibilities. And with this lived truth in mind, it is important to note that this early evidence demonstrates not only what is possible, but even more critically, it is changing the narrative about who our young people are and what they can do. Because what we know is that the systems change piece is critical. Getting to the outcomes we seek, the metric impact is critical. Even more critically are the stories that we tell about the success that our young people experience. And then to connect it to Dan's point, how we then bring that narrative across different sectors to the employers, to policymakers, to other elected officials, so that collectively we are telling a different story about who our young people are and the assets they bear for the future for all of us in our country. Please join me in recognizing the success of our communities. So I want to quickly talk about what is coming. So most recently, we launched Equity Counts. It's a new initiative that is committed to deepening the rigorous focus on metrics and impact across our network. And we are really excited that we have launched this to do deep work in 6 communities and then more broadly across 16 communities. That is essentially going to help us set community-wide metrics for tracking outcomes for Opportunity Youth. We're excited for what that means for our network, but also for the field. And at the same time, we recently announced the Global Opportunity Youth Initiative. Although this work is still being designed, it will focus on a global strategy to reconnect Opportunity Youth to employment in 5 countries. And we look forward to sharing more about this initiative throughout our time here in Aspen in the months to come. And I want to ask Jamie to just stand up because he's leading that work for our organization. And I want to make sure that if you have questions and you want to follow up, okay, so maybe he's not here. We will try to introduce him later. So a few quick other areas of growth for us include seeking to disrupt the inequity in our community investments by trying to bring in additional rural and tribal communities. And we also look forward to sharing an RFP later this year or early next year aimed at increasing investments in youth-led change. So I want to close quickly by talking about progress across the field because, as you know, these convenings are not just about what our network does. It is about the movement and how the movement continues to grow. So what I'm so thankful for is that some of this I feel like Shawnice and Jamiel teed up for us. But with the Reconnecting Youth campaign, for those of you who may not know, the campaign was so successful this year in terms of advocating Congress to increase federal federal funding for Opportunity Youth programs. So what they were able to do in 2018 is essentially expand the number to $218 million of federal appropriations for Opportunity Youth. And at the same time, there is an anticipated $129 million more coming in 2019. The aggregate total of increase of investments for Opportunity Youth is now $347 million in federal dollars for young people. And if you are not aware of this, I want to put in a plug for the session later where we will go deep into helping our network understand how do you tap into those dollars for our young people. And speaking of our young people and youth-led change, again, not to the young people in our room, the Opportunity Youth United Network, which is a national movement of young leaders led by LaShawn Amato, and is comprised of former Opportunity Youth, is continuing to grow. In 2018, the number of community action teams has increased in size to 17 communities with the goal of reaching 20 by 2019. And maybe most critically, what I'm proud to share is that the community action teams are currently mobilizing in 13 communities across the Opportunity Youth Forum network, and together they are working to implement strategies to increase voter turnout in their communities for Opportunity Youth and the community at large. In my mind and in my heart, when I think of the work of the community action teams, the rallying cry that comes to my mind is, "This is what democracy looks like." Does anybody know the response to that? I'm just curious. This is what democracy looks like. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Tell me what democracy looks like. Thank you. And that is the future we are so excited about when we think about the power and potential of the young people in our network. So I'm going to close quickly. There's a lot more that we want to say. We have a really robust learning agenda for you all. We're really excited for you to partake in it. That includes everything from opening with our new president to Professor Sean Gendright, who is going to speak specifically about healing-centered engagement, and probably most notably, closing with Jeff Chang, who is the Vice President of Narrative, Arts, and Culture at Race Forward. And what I need to probably underline is that we were very intentional about closing with Jeff Chang, and I want to harken back to Steve's opening, because what he did is he so eloquently borrowed from Kendrick Lamar and other leaders across hip-hop that also actually borrowed this from R&B and soul, and borrowed it from gospel, and also got that originally from spirituals, is the refrain, "We gon' be all right." And that felt like the most important message for us to close with here at this convening. In closing, what I want to make sure I do is just thank and acknowledge all of the people who made this convening possible. I want to start by acknowledging all of our communities. Thank you for being here with us. It's wonderful to look across the room and see new faces and to think about all of the rich opportunities that will continue to grow. I also want to acknowledge all of the youth leaders, and I want to ask quickly, if you are a young person, please stand up so we can see who you are. Come on. Thank you all for the work that you do. I want to acknowledge our partners across the field, OYU, the Opportunity Youth Network, the Re-Engagement Network, the Forum for Youth Investment, and most importantly, our learning partners, Harder & Company, our evaluation partner, Equal Measure, and of course, our implementation partner, Jobs for the Future. And then finally, I want to close by thanking the Aspen team. I feel so blessed and privileged that daily these are the people that we toil with to do this work, where we are reminded in the wisdom of Bianca to shine our lights so brightly. So I want to specifically thank and ask you to stand up if you're still here in the room. Emma Human, Sherry Brady, Jamiel Alexander, Shawnice Jackson, Ken Thompson, Jamie McAuliffe, Ravia Ismail, Suzanne Towns, and especially Elena Nimoy. Melody and Steve, thank you to the Aspen team. We hope that everyone will be encouraged to use your lights to connect with each other while you're here. We pray that this is a rich learning opportunity, not just for your work, but for your collaborative and as you continue to develop your strategies back home. We are transitioning now into all of our breakout sessions, but we look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. for our morning plenary. Thank you, everyone.